July 8th, 2021. A Ring camera captures a young man going door to door in a quiet Wisconsin neighborhood. He looks worried, distraught even. He is asking neighbors if they have seen his parents. His name is Chandler Holderson. He is 23 years old. And to everyone watching, he appears to be a devoted son desperately searching for answers. But nobody could have expected what detectives were about to uncover beneath that carefully constructed performance. Because behind the tears, behind the media appearances, behind every word Chandler spoke to investigators, lay a web of financial lies, fake identities, and a cold-blooded killer hiding in plain sight. Now, it is July 7th, 2021. 23-year-old Chandler Michael Holderson walks into the Dane County Sheriff's Office and files a missing person report for his parents, Bart and Krista Holderson. According to Chandler, the two had packed their bags and headed to the family cabin in White Lake, Wisconsin on Friday, July 2nd, to spend the 4th of July holiday weekend in the wilderness. They planned to repair a fireplace at the cabin with another couple while they were there. They were supposed to be back by Monday. It is now Wednesday. Their phones go straight to voicemail every time Chandler tries to reach them, though he notes this is not entirely unusual given the extremely poor cell service near the cabin. Investigators initially entertained the idea that maybe the couple simply decided to extend their trip. People do it all the time. Maybe the fresh air and the lakeside quiet convinced them to stay a little longer. But then Chandler's girlfriend, Catherine, offers a perspective that stops that line of thinking cold. Bart Holderson, she explains, is a man defined by punctuality. He does not miss commitments. He does not fail to check in. And Krista, she was due at work on Tuesday. Not only is she absent from her shift, but she is at serious risk of being fired if she does not show up soon. These are not people who disappear without a word. These are not people who let days pass without a single text or phone call to their son. Something is deeply, fundamentally wrong. And then comes the detail that transforms this from a puzzling disappearance into something far more alarming. According to Chandler, his parents were picked up by friends on the morning of July 2nd before he even woke up. Friends, he says, though he cannot say who they were, he has absolutely no idea. For all law enforcement knows at this point, Bart and Krista Holderson could be anywhere. What investigators do not yet realize is that Chandler knows considerably more than he is letting on. And that truth is about to bubble up to the surface in ways he never anticipated. Officers make the 3-hour drive north to the family cabin in White Lake. Meanwhile, Chandler spends the remainder of the day speaking to local news networks, spreading the word about his missing parents, playing the role of the desperate son to perfection. At the cabin, investigators meet Chandler's older brother Mitchell and his girlfriend and begin looking around the property for any signs of the couple. The cabin is locked from every side. Officers are forced to break their way in. And what they find inside is not the scene of a recent holiday visit. It is the scene of a place that has not been touched in months. Dust covers every surface, completely undisturbed. There are no fresh food supplies, no signs of activity. The foliage surrounding the structure is completely intact, unbroken by any recent foot traffic. Mitchell himself acknowledges that the family only visits the cabin a few times a year, and it is painfully clear from the condition of the place that no one has been there recently, certainly not a few days earlier, as Chandler claimed. Officers push further, forcing open the boat shed nearby. All 3 of the Holderson family's boats are inside, accounted for, going nowhere. There is no boating adventure to explain their absence. Every piece of evidence at the cabin points to the same conclusion. Bart and Krista Holderson never made it here. Whatever happened to them happened somewhere else entirely. With the cabin ruled out, investigators redirect their focus toward the last known location of the couple, their home. From the outside, the house looks perfectly ordinary. But the moment investigators step inside and look deeper, the story changes. The first thing that catches their attention is the fireplace. One of its glass panes is missing. Odd, but not immediately alarming on its own. Then they notice something that cannot be so easily brushed aside. Parts of the house appear to have been scrubbed with unusual thoroughness, as if someone had cleaned certain areas very recently and very deliberately. Floor tiles and cabinets are missing from the kitchen. Chandler will later claim these were part of an ongoing renovation. But the most chilling discovery comes when investigators apply luminol to the surfaces throughout the home, particularly in the basement. Hidden beneath what appears to be a recently cleaned surface, massive blood stains reveal themselves, splattered in patterns that speak to something violent and catastrophic having occurred within these walls. The amount is not minor, it is not incidental, it is alarming, and the fact that this blood is inside the house, not at a remote cabin where something might plausibly have gone wrong, makes it even more disturbing. There is only one person who can shed light on what happened here, Chandler Holderson, the last person known to have seen his parents alive. On the morning of July 8th, less than 24 hours after filing the missing person report, Chandler is picked up by officers and escorted to the public safety building for questioning. He has been cooperative so far. Detectives expect that to continue. But when they leave him alone in the interrogation room for a few minutes before the formal interview begins, the CCTV camera inside captures him behaving in a way that raises immediate red flags. He moves toward the door, positioning himself as if he is trying to listen in on what the detectives are saying outside the room. It could be written off as anxiety, as curiosity about whether officers have found anything useful. But if he simply wanted information, he could ask them directly when they walked in. The behavior lingers in the back of every detective's mind as they enter the room. And sure enough, the moment they sit down, Chandler's first concern is not about his parents. It is about what investigators found at the house. By the way, he says, a detective at my house said something's happened, and while we're leaving, people were going inside. Is there a warrant for my house? It is a strange thing to lead with. A son whose parents are missing, who is sitting in an interrogation room surrounded by people trying to find them, and his opening concern is about legal access to his home. The investigators take note and keep moving, pressing him for the details of what happened in the days leading up to the disappearance. Chandler has a story ready. He has clearly thought about it. On the Wednesday before his parents left, he explains, he was at home watching Wheel of Fortune with his father over lunch. At some point, while tossing a tennis ball around with the dog, the ball struck the fireplace and shattered one of the glass panes. During the cleanup, Chandler claims he sustained a serious cut on his foot from the broken glass, deep enough that blood was gushing everywhere. He claims the bleeding became severe after he pulled a piece of glass out with tweezers. Just like that, in under a minute, Chandler provides a seemingly reasonable explanation for both the missing fireplace glass and the blood traces found at the house. It is a neat, tidy little story, the kind that sounds rehearsed. But here is the problem. Catherine, who is being interviewed separately at the same time, also corroborates the fireplace story. She confirms that Chandler did injure his foot and that she helped him clean up afterward, even going to her mother's house to retrieve hydrogen peroxide and a Swiffer. But there is a notable contradiction that immediately catches investigators' attention. Chandler describes blood gushing from a massive, deep wound on his foot. Catherine, when asked about the blood at the house, tells a very different story. She says she did not really see a lot of blood. She explains that it was probably because it was only a small cut on his big toe. The accounts are not just different in tone, they are fundamentally incompatible. And that is just the beginning of the inconsistencies. As Chandler continues talking, he mentions that on the 4th of July, he visited Catherine's mother, Dulcie Melander, for a dinner gathering where he apparently had a mental breakdown connected to a physical condition. He explains that he fell down the stairs in late June, hitting his spine and suffering what he describes as permanent nerve damage, resulting in numbness in his legs severe enough that he claims it makes it impossible for him to drive. It is a genuinely sympathetic detail, the kind of thing that makes a person seem vulnerable and honest. Except that, throughout his account of the days following his parents' disappearance, Chandler casually describes driving to multiple locations. He drove to Dulcie's home. He drove to a family friend named Dan's place to watch 4th of July fireworks. If the nerve damage is so severe that driving is impossible, how is he behind the wheel at all? The contradiction piles onto the growing list of things that do not add up. There is also the matter of who actually prompted the missing person report. Chandler initially presents himself as a worried son who proactively went to police because something felt off. But as detectives dig deeper, they learn the truth. It was Dan, the family friend, who convinced Chandler to go file the report. Chandler did not walk into that sheriff's office out of his own mounting concern. He was nudged there by someone else. Then, there is the text message. Chandler tells investigators that he received a message from his mother's phone on July 4th, saying that she and Bart had arrived safely at the cabin and that they were planning to attend a local parade later that day. It reads like the perfect alibi. But investigators are rapidly closing in on a truth that dismantles the entire narrative Chandler has carefully constructed. CCTV footage from a neighbor's home tells the real story. The footage shows clearly that no vehicle pulled into the Holderson driveway on the morning of July 2nd. No mysterious friends arrived to pick up Bart and Krista. The couple never left their home. Whatever happened to them happened right there, inside those walls where the bloodstains are still glowing under luminol. And as the interrogation continues, Chandler's story begins to visibly fray. He struggles to remember which day Catherine spent with him, correcting himself mid-sentence, second-guessing his own account, filling gaps with a vague mix of video games and friends online. For someone who came in with what felt like a well-rehearsed timeline, the seams are starting to show. Outside, while the interrogation continues, investigators are pursuing every lead they can find, and a tip from a woman named Krez, whose farmhouse near Cottage Grove is known to the Holderson family, sends a unit to her property immediately. Krez reports that Chandler had come to her on July 3rd, asking if he could use her heated swimming pool as physical therapy for his legs. She agreed and let him in. But when she returned to check on him about an hour later, Chandler was nowhere near the pool. The cover was still on. His car was parked near the edge of the woods, trunk open. The entire thing felt strange. She reported it, and that report may have saved investigators weeks of searching. Within minutes of searching the farm, investigators discover something that turns this missing persons case into a murder investigation without any further question. A dismembered male torso, wrapped in a tarp, concealed near the tree line at the edge of Cress's property. DNA testing confirms the remains belong to Bart Holderson. A search of the nearby area also turns up several tools believed to have been used to commit the murder, hidden inside an old iron barrel. Back at the Holderson home, a separate team of investigators uncovers additional critical evidence. Both parents' phones are found inside the house, wrapped in aluminum foil to prevent them from being tracked or pinged by cell towers. 5 shell casings are recovered from the basement, confirming that Bart and Krista were shot while still inside their own home. The story Chandler told about mysterious friends picking up his parents in the early morning hours of July 2nd, before he ever woke up, is a complete fabrication from start to finish. By now, detectives have gathered enough to confront Chandler directly, and when they do, the mask comes off completely. "I think it's time we start talking about what happened to your parents," one detective says, the truthful version. And just like that, the son who spent hours willingly recounting every detail of his days, who volunteered memories about Wheel of Fortune and tennis balls and his dog and cornbread and fireworks, goes completely silent. He asks for a lawyer. The shift is instant and absolute. The performance is over, but the investigation is far from done. Krista's remains have not yet been found, and investigators need to piece together the full picture of what Chandler did in the hours and days after he killed his parents. The answer comes on July 14th, when Catherine remembers something that, at the time, seemed trivial. Suspicious that Chandler might be cheating on her, she had quietly enabled location tracking on his Snapchat account. On July 3rd, she checked his location and was surprised to see him in an area near the Wisconsin River, far from anywhere he had any reason to be. She took a screenshot, thinking nothing of it beyond her jealousy at the time. That screenshot points investigators directly to the location where Chandler disposed of Krista's remains. A search of the area near the Wisconsin River reveals several dismembered body parts that are later confirmed, through DNA testing, to belong to Krista Holderson. The spot, as it turns out, is a location Chandler had visited many times before, almost always with his parents. His decision to go there alone on July 3rd was not random. It was the final step in a disposal plan he had been executing since the night of the murders. Catherine's interviews also help investigators fill in the timeline of what Chandler did between killing his parents and disposing of their remains. She recalls going with him to her mother's house on July 2nd to pick up hydrogen peroxide and cleaning supplies, because, as she understood it at the time, Chandler had broken the fireplace glass and cut his foot. He also made burgers for dinner that evening at the grill, burning his hands in the process. The burned hands, a detail that might seem inconsequential, become one of the most grotesque parts of this entire story. Footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera captures a bright light emanating from the chimney of the Holderson home on the night of July 2nd. Combined with bone fragments that investigators recover from inside the fireplace, the picture becomes horrifyingly clear. Chandler Holderson did not just shoot and dismember his parents. He attempted to burn their remains in the family fireplace. The fire got out of hand, shattering the fireplace glass, which is the real reason that Payne was missing when investigators arrived. The burns on his hands were not from a grill. They were from trying to incinerate the people who raised him. CCTV footage recovered as the investigation wraps up shows Chandler making calculated purchases in the days surrounding the murders. He bought the tarp used to transport Bart's dismembered remains. He purchased large bags of ice to slow decomposition while he figured out what to do with the bodies. Every move was deliberate. Every purchase was part of a plan. This was not a crime of sudden passion. This was methodical. And now the only remaining question is why? Why would a 23-year-old man with a girlfriend who loved him, parents who supported him, and what appeared to be a promising future ahead of him, murder his own family in cold blood? The answer, when it finally surfaces, is as pathetic as it is devastating. Chandler Holderson had been living a lie for years. Not a small lie, not an exaggeration. A comprehensive, sustained, deeply elaborate fabrication of an entire life that simply did not exist. He never graduated from college. The degree, the certificates, the academic accomplishments he described to his parents over the years, none of it was real. He never held most of the jobs he claimed to have worked. And the crown jewel of his invented life, the prestigious job offer from SpaceX that he told Catherine about, the one that supposedly meant they were moving to Florida together to start their future? A complete fiction. He had created official sounding burner email accounts and used them to send fabricated correspondence to himself, emails that looked like they came from employers and institutions, all designed to fool his parents into believing their son was building something exceptional. In reality, he was spending his days playing video games. Chandler believed he had the whole thing under control. He had even manufactured the story about his fall down the stairs and the resulting nerve damage specifically to give himself an excuse for why he could not take the fake SpaceX job, a convenient medical condition to explain away a job that was never real to begin with. But then his father started pulling at the thread. On July 1st, 2021, just one day before the murders, Bart Holderson called Chandler's college. Pretending to be his son, Bart asked a staff member about transcripts and certificates, trying to get documentation of the education Chandler had supposedly completed. The call was recorded, and on that recording, the truth begins to unravel in real time. The college staff member checks the account. There are no completed programs, no certificates earned, no degrees, just a scattering of individual classes taken.
I tried to work with Daniel Spike to see if he can get through the information. I don't know if he's with you guys anymore, but it just seems like the ball keeps getting dropped.
He then directly asks about the certificate, only to be confronted with the shocking reality of the situation.
Now, if we've earned a certificate saying that solar
Holderson ever sent was to his son at approximately 1:30 in the afternoon on July 2nd. The message read simply, "I'm ready when you are." Chandler's response was a bullet. He shot his father first at around 1:30 that same afternoon, while Krista was still at work. He then waited. When Krista returned home at around 5 p.m., he shot her too. The night that followed was dedicated to attempting to erase what he had done. He tried to burn their remains in the fireplace. When that went wrong, he wrapped what he could not destroy in a tarp and kept the remains packed in ice to slow decomposition. He drove to Kreza's farmhouse the next day, using the pretense of pool therapy to gain access to the woods on her property so he could bury what remained of his father. He visited the Wisconsin River and disposed of what remained of his mother at a spot the family had shared countless times before. And then, on July 7th, with Dan's encouragement, he walked into the Dane County Sheriff's Office and reported his parents missing. He cried in front of news cameras. He knocked on neighbors' doors. He told a story about friends no one had ever seen and a 4th of July trip that never happened. He staged a note his mother had written a week earlier and placed it on the kitchen table as if she had left it that morning. He rehearsed answers to questions he expected investigators to ask. To Chandler Holderson, murdering his own parents in cold blood was the better option than sitting across from his father at a college office and admitting that everything he had told his family about his life was a lie. He was arrested on July 8th, 2021. The same day, he sat in that interrogation room and asked for a lawyer. He stood trial in January 2022, charged with 8 felony counts, including 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide and 2 counts of mutilating a corpse. The jury deliberated and returned with a verdict, guilty on all major charges. The sentence handed down by the court was life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bart and Krista Holderson were the kind of people who showed up quietly and consistently for everyone around them. Bart was the neighbor who shoveled your driveway without being asked. Krista was the mother who played Mario Kart with her kids and made the Yoshi sound every time she picked her character, the kind of detail that lives forever in the memory of the people who loved her. They supported their son through everything, believed in the life he was building, trusted the story he was telling. And that trust, that unconditional love, is ultimately what made them vulnerable to the person who should have protected them above everyone else. There is a moment in Chandler's interview, before he stops talking and asks for a lawyer, where one of the detectives asks him to just...
And while we were leaving, people were going inside. Is there a warrant for my house?
Should there be?
No, I'm just wondering.
Any version of reality that approached honesty. Chandler said nothing, because there is no version of this story that makes sense. There is no justification that stands up. There is only a young man who chose the permanent destruction of 2 innocent lives over the temporary humiliation of being caught in a lie. And somewhere in a Wisconsin farmhouse, in the woods near a river where a family used to spend time together, the full weight of that choice echoes in every moment of silence that follows.